Once willing to defy everything to be together, Charles and Camilla once stunned the world with their controversial fairy tale romance. But now, the glittering curtain is tearing apart, revealing a royal tragedy like no other. The newly crowned king was seen breaking down in tears, not in front of flashing cameras, but behind closed palace doors when the woman he once loved so passionately turned that very love into a weapon of cold-blooded blackmail. His tears didn't fall for public sympathy. They fell in a room filled only with chilling whispers of secrets that could destroy the Windsor dynasty overnight. Rumors are swirling that Camilla is holding on to a handwritten letter, a damning audio recording, and possibly undeniable evidence tied to decades of scandals buried deep in Buckingham's archives. With just one click, that dark past could explode across global headlines, shattering the carefully curated image of a reformist king that Charles has tried so hard to build. The king trembled, holding back tears, desperately pleading for time, while Camilla stood silent, spinning her invisible weapon using his deepest fears as bargaining chips. Was she demanding money, power, or an unprecedented privilege? No one knows for sure. What's certain is that in that very moment, the throne shook violently, and all of Britain held its breath wondering whether the truth would erupt or remain locked behind those gilded, icy palace walls. What seemed to be a reward of love for a young and innocent girl turned out to be a golden cage for Diana, where every breath was suffocated by betrayal and lies. When she entered into marriage with Prince Charles, the world erupted in celebration. Crowds cheered. Millions of eyes followed her every step, all believing they were witnessing a real-life fairy tale. But behind the gilded palace doors, the truth was a tragedy without end. From the earliest days of royal life, Diana felt isolated. She was not embraced by her husband's heart, but instead treated as a strategic pawn to satisfy the public and fulfill the duty of bearing heirs. Camilla Parker Bowles, a name Diana could never forget nor forgive, was always there, a shadow cast over her marriage. Charles's relationship with Camilla had never truly ended. His heart was never fully Diana's. Camilla was not just the other woman. She was a silent accomplice in Diana's loneliness, the one who hovered over the young princess's every moment. While Diana carried out her duties with grace and a public smile, Charles gave his warmth and attention to someone else. Diana once admitted that she often felt invisible. Charles may have stood beside her in photos and events, but emotionally, he was elsewhere. Camilla, with her calm exterior and sharp instincts, maintained influence over Charles. Diana found the secret gifts, the handwritten letters, the expensive jewelry. Each discovery was a knife to her already wounded heart. The pain reached a climax when Diana confronted Camilla at a party and said the bitter truth, "I know what's going on. Don't treat me like I'm stupid." Diana's suffering wasn't just the result of betrayal. It came from the chilling silence of those around her. The royal family, rather than defend her, chose to protect tradition and preserve image. Diana was isolated, pressured into silence for the sake of the monarchy. No one asked if she was all right. No one truly listened. That loneliness drove her into depression, eating disorders, and a shattered sense of trust in her marriage. But Diana didn't remain silent forever. She spoke out. Her 1990 interview with the BBC shocked the world. She spoke of a marriage of three people, tearing down the illusion the royal family had tried so hard to maintain. Her voice shook the foundations of the monarchies. Camilla, rather than express remorse, stood firm beside Charles, proving that even though Diana had the love of the people, she never had her husband's heart. The pain didn't end with divorce. When Diana finally thought she had escaped the shadow of a false marriage, fate ended her life in a tragic accident still shrouded in mystery. In her final days, some say she had found new love, a glimmer of hope. But was it enough to heal years of emotional wounds? Could she ever have truly recovered? Looking back, Charles and Camilla, in one way or another, helped shape Diana's tragedy. not just through actions, but through coldness, indifference, and selfish love. They loved each other, but their love came at the cost of another woman's suffering. And while today they stand together as king and queen, the price they paid was the broken heart of a woman who became a symbol of grace and grief, Princess Diana. It seemed that with a love that couldn't be greater, they would cherish each other and stay together for the rest of their lives. But according to a recent source, that may not be the case, and the grand, wood-paneled Chamber of Parliament had seen its fair share of speeches, but never one like this. Princess Anne stood calmly before the gathered officials, her expression composed, her tone sharp. She didn't wait for ceremony. Effective immediately, she said, Camilla is to be stripped of all honorary military and royal titles. The words echoed like thunder in the room. Silence fell. No one moved. Camilla, seated just behind the front bench, froze. Her eyes widened. Her hand gripped the edge of her seat. Anne didn't flinch. Across from her, a few MPs audibly gasped. This wasn't routine. It wasn't symbolic. This was real. Anne had just thrown down the gauntlet in front of the entire political body, and the monarchy was now center stage. What made the moment even more cutting was the emotional flashback layered behind it. Diana once vowed this day would come. Anne later told a close aide that vow wasn't public, but Anne had remembered. And she chose this moment not in private, not behind palace gates, but in Parliament, where history would record every word. The timing, the symbolism, the weight it all hit at once. Camilla looked around for support. None came. Charles wasn't present. William wasn't present. And Anne, she had the full attention of the nation. This wasn't a side feud. This was the opening shot of a new royal war, and it started with the erasure of a crown. Live and unfiltered, the nation gasped. But the headlines would do more than describe shock. They would detail exactly what Camilla lost, why it matters, and how this changes everything. Up next, what roles were stripped, how royal power works, and why Anne insists this wasn't revenge, it was royal justice. What was stripped and why it matters. When Anne declared Camilla stripped of titles, it wasn't just for show. She named each one the honorary colonel of several regiments, patron of the Queen's Royal Medical Corps, honorary commander of naval reserves, and more. Each role represented decades of royal tradition, military respect, and national visibility. Now gone, effective immediately, Anne had said, and she meant it. Losing these roles means more than missing parades or formal dinners. They are tied directly to a royal's rank, public presence, and influence. Without them, Camilla loses status at events, her placement in the royal order, and even her access to ceremonial decisions. Titles in this world are not vanity, they're power. And that power just vanished. Royal precedence isn't casual. It dictates who bows to whom, who rides where, who speaks first, and who enters last. With her roles removed, Camilla now stands, symbolically and officially, lower in the hierarchy than Anne. It changes how the public sees her. It alters her function within the institution and isolates her at a moment when alliances matter most. Anne didn't call it punishment. This is justice, she said, simply, justice for the monarchy, for legacy, for truth. Her face didn't soften. Her voice didn't waver. This wasn't personal. She insisted. It was principle. And in a monarchy built on appearances and authority, principle had just redrawn the royal battlefield. Stripping titles is one thing, but launching this move so publicly, so strategically, raises another question. Why now? Why here? And what is Anne truly aiming for? The next chapter reveals the deeper plan and the echoes of Diana's legacy woven into every word Anne spoke. Anne's calculated opening maneuver. This wasn't a rash act. Anne's team had prepared it for weeks, every word, every clause, every title to be revoked. But the timing, That was her masterstroke. Just as public opinion reached a quiet turning point, just as Camilla's influence appeared strongest, Anne struck when few expected and when it would echo the loudest. "This wasn't spontaneous," said one palace aide. "It was surgical." The ghost of Diana hovered over every own line. Anne had promised her, privately, emotionally, to protect the integrity of the monarchy, not to carry revenge, but to uphold values. "You can't rewrite history," Diana had once told her. And Anne listened. For 2 decades, she waited. And when the moment came, she used Parliament as her stage and principle as her weapon. Legally, she didn't need to make it public, but she wanted to not to humiliate, but to expose. If done in silence, the palace could have spun it, but in public, on the record, it couldn't be erased. Anne's move was a message to every courtier, every aide, every distant relative still playing politics in the background. Truth comes before titles. Anne's goal wasn't chaos, it was correction. She saw herself not as a rebel, but as a steward of tradition. But she knew exactly how it would look, and she chose to embrace it anyway. "If the crown has lost its clarity," she said privately, "then someone must restore it." She didn't shout, she didn't fight, she simply acted, and the monarchy trembled. But not everyone saw it as courage. In the next room, a royal figure, once untouchable, was unraveling fast. Camilla's crumbling shield. Camilla sat frozen as the final title was read aloud. Her eyes glassy, her mouth slightly open. She looked less like a queen and more like someone watching her entire identity slip away in slow motion. In public, she had always carried herself with dignity, but this was something else entirely. Her silence wasn't composed, it was stunned. Moments later, aides guided her out of the chamber. She didn't speak, didn't even acknowledge them. Cameras caught her expression, pale, blank, utterly deflated. "This wasn't just a political hit," whispered one aide. "It was personal." The loss of titles struck where it hurt most: her status, her symbolism, and her sense of belonging. For decades, Camilla had clawed her way into the royal fabric, once the outsider, then the mistress, and finally the queen consort with full honors. That transformation took years of careful public image work, charity patronage, and ceremonial poise. Now, stripped publicly by Anne, she was back at square one. Except this time, the humiliation was televised. "She's unraveling," one palace insider confided. Behind the scenes, Camilla broke down in private, not in fury, but in disbelief. She had survived media attacks, public hatred, and royal hesitation, but she never expected betrayal from inside the family. "I wasn't supposed to be their enemy," she reportedly said. "I was supposed to be their future." And now she's not sure what or who she still is. But personal devastation isn't the only fallout. Inside Buckingham Palace, shockwaves are spreading fast. Advisors panic, aides scramble, and the monarchy's polished surface begins to crack. Up next, how the palace is trying to control the narrative before it spins out of reach. Royal fallout begins the moment Anne's words echoed through Parliament. Phones started ringing in Buckingham. Senior aides bolted to crisis rooms. Communications officers drafted emergency talking points. What just happened was the question bouncing off every royal wall. This wasn't just family drama. It was a constitutional thunderclap. A senior royal had publicly stripped another without prior public endorsement from the monarch. Chaos had arrived. Behind the scenes, Charles was mid-call with his legal advisors. His planned speech for a public charity event was canceled within the hour. "The king is deeply concerned," one source said, trying to soften the story. But concern wasn't enough. The press smelled blood, and the palace was playing catch-up. They hadn't been briefed. Not even Charles had seen the speech in full beforehand. Public opinion began to fracture. Talk shows debated whether Anne had gone too far. Some argued she was right to act boldly. Others called it a family civil war dressed as royal reform. Hashtags like #justice, Diana and #Queen, no more trended. Newspapers ran front-page spreads comparing Camilla's downfall to the exile of Wallace Simpson. This wasn't just about roles, it was about royal trust. Meanwhile, palace aides faced internal war zones. Factions formed, those who supported Anne's action and those still loyal to Camilla. "We're witnessing the crown split in real time," one insider whispered. And in the middle, Charles cornered. He couldn't reverse Anne's move without looking weak, but staying silent was eroding public confidence. A power vacuum was forming, and fast. As palace officials panic, there's one person not spiraling: Camilla. Because deep behind closed doors, she's already planning her next move. And what she's considering could turn this personal humiliation into a constitutional crisis. Legal threat, public leverage. The Queen Consort isn't done yet. Inside her private suite at Clarence House, Camilla sat with a tight circle of advisors. The tears had dried. What replaced them? Focus. Her voice was low, steady. "They want to erase me. Let's see if they can handle what comes next." Aides exchanged glances. That wasn't a breakdown. It was a warning. The first question: could Anne's action be legally challenged? Royal Legal Counsel wasn't sure. Title stripping is rare, and no clear precedent exists for one royal doing it without full sovereign sign-off. "She may have overstepped," whispered one legal aide. Camilla's team began combing royal protocols, pulling past precedents, preparing statements, but also quietly drawing lines for defense. Then came the real leverage: letters, documents, stories. Rumors say Camilla's kept every correspondence that could back her claims of royal commitment and private promises. "If she goes public," said one advisor, "it won't be pretty. She might not just defend her role, she might go after Anne. She has allies too, former military leaders, charity heads, and even extended royals sympathetic to her cause. She's not the villain they think she is," one family friend insisted. And with that, the plan took shape. Camilla could position herself not as a dethroned queen, but as a woman betrayed. Her story not about titles, but survival. And if she played it right, the public might just turn in her favor. But while Camilla plots, another battle rages where no peace can exist inside Charles. His love for Camilla, his loyalty to Anne, his duty to the crown. Charles in the crossfire, King Charles stood in the middle of a storm, one he never expected to face. On one side, his beloved Camilla, stripped of her titles, publicly humiliated. On the other, his sister, firm in her belief that she was protecting the monarchy. And in between, a lifetime of decisions he couldn't take back. "How did it come to this?" he whispered behind closed doors. For hours, Charles remained secluded in his study. Aides knocked, but few were allowed in. He sat with the speech from Parliament in his hand, rereading every line Anne had spoken. Her words weren't personal attacks. They were calm, methodical, and impossible to dismiss. And that's what tore him apart. She hadn't acted out of rage. She had acted from belief. He wanted to speak out. He wanted to defend Camilla. But constitutional constraints held him back. Anne's move, made in Parliament, had precedent in political cover. Reversing it would trigger a public backlash and possibly weaken his reign. "I love her," Charles reportedly told one advisor. "But I can't undo this without risking everything." The monarch was no longer just a father or husband. He was trapped. To make it worse, his health was beginning to suffer. Insiders noted he looked pale, thinner. He canceled 3 appearances and was reportedly advised to rest. But rest wasn't possible. The crown was fracturing around him. And if he didn't act soon, he risked losing control completely, not just of the situation, but of the monarchy itself. But while Charles hesitates, Anne isn't. Her strategy is unfolding with precision, and her influence is growing by the hour. Coming up, we reveal what Anne's really aiming for and whether this is justice or a bold royal revolution in disguise. Anne's strategy. Anne sat alone after the Parliament speech, not gloating, calculating. She wasn't seeking applause, she was securing the monarchy's soul, or so she believed. This wasn't rebellion, she told one senior courtier. This was repair. Her move wasn't just to remove Camilla, it was to restore what Diana stood for: duty, legacy, dignity. And now the public saw her as the monarchy's moral compass. But Anne wasn't doing this alone. She had quiet support from veteran courtiers, key civil council, and even a few senior Commonwealth figures. She has the old guard behind her, whispered a palace insider, and they've had doubts about Camilla for years. That support wasn't loud, but it was firm, and it was growing. Her strategy was to keep the public on her side: appearances at military events, speeches about national service, subtle nods to Diana's values. Anne wasn't campaigning, but the optics were clear. Every move she made contrasted with Camilla's absence, and every word she didn't say spoke louder than palace spin. She wasn't seizing power, but she was inheriting it, step by quiet step. Still, the question remained: how far would she go? Would she leave Camilla completely cut off? Or was this just a warning? Some believed Anne wanted balance. Others feared she wouldn't stop until Camilla was erased from royal life entirely. This isn't vengeance, Anne told one aide. But if the monarchy must choose between loyalty and legacy, we choose legacy. But Camilla isn't letting Anne write the final chapter alone. Behind the scenes, she's finding strength and support. In the next act, Camilla's allies gather. Not all is lost. And the counter message: it's already being written. Camilla's allies mobilize inside a quiet drawing room at Clarence House. Camilla gathered with her remaining loyalist figures from the military, charity leaders, and a few royals from the fringes. She sat poised, no longer stunned. They think I'll fade into silence, she said flatly. They forget I've built my own legacy too. And with that, her counterplay began. First came the quiet pushback. Retired generals and colonels who had worked closely with her began giving statements to the press. She served with honor, one said. Charitable organizations she led started issuing public praise. Her commitment to our cause is unmatched. These weren't loud defenses, but they were measured, emotional, and direct. Then came the media push. Trusted journalists, long sympathetic to Camilla, began writing op-eds. One headline read, "Don't erase a queen who earned her crown." The narrative was shifting. Camilla wasn't just a royal consort, she was a woman who had endured, contributed, and led. And slowly, sympathy began creeping back in. The most powerful argument: that Camilla was handpicked and publicly endorsed by the late Queen Elizabeth. She was trusted by the monarch, said one family friend. That matters. The message: you don't just strip someone of the crown's blessing without a fight. Camilla may not be marching through Parliament, but her allies are now surrounding the battlefield. But while narratives swirl and loyalty is tested, the pressure on King Charles reaches a boiling point. His next move will either restore peace or push the monarchy into open fracture. Coming up, the king steps into the fire, and the world watches what he'll do next. Public and media pressure. The headline hit within minutes. Queen consort stripped in shock Parliament. British tabloids printed emergency editions. Was Diana's promise finally delivered? One front page screamed, the airwaves filled with nonstop commentary. Talk shows pitted Team Anne against Team Camilla. And on social media, it was a wildfire: #justice for or Diana, #Queen no more, #Princess power. Everyone had an opinion. Polls exploded across the country. By evening, public support for Anne soared. She's the only one protecting tradition, one citizen told Sky News. But a growing minority began sympathizing with Camilla. She didn't deserve this. Not like this, another said on BBC Radio. The nation was divided, not just by titles, but by emotion, memory, immorality. Commentators raised one unavoidable name, Diana. She wasn't just a shadow anymore. She was the lens through which every royal action was now judged. Diana's ghost is rewriting the monarchy, one expert declared, and the world was watching. American media joined in. Australian outlets asked whether Camilla's removal would trigger changes in Commonwealth relations. This wasn't just a scandal. It was global. Inside the palace, aides tried to manage the media wave, but it was futile. Every silence from Charles deepened speculation. Every appearance by Anne became a headline. Every rumor about Camilla fed new questions. The monarchy was trending for all the wrong reasons. This could undo everything we've rebuilt, said one palace PR official. The pressure was no longer private, it was public, palpable, and rising fast. As the cameras flash and the polls shift, one man stands between resolution and collapse. King Charles must act, but every move is a risk, every delay a threat. Will he restore Camilla, defend Anne, or lose them both? The next scene reveals the king's impossible choice and the legacy it will define. Charles plans his next move alone in the map room. King Charles faced the most defining decision of his reign. His advisors were split. You can't sit this out, one warned. But if you reverse Anne's move, you risk a constitutional challenge. Another whispered, Camilla needs your protection. If not now, when? But Charles knew this wasn't just about titles. It was about trust. He met with legal counsel in private. Could he reinstate Camilla's roles without parliamentary consensus? Could he override Anne's act without turning the palace into a public war zone? The answers weren't clear. You are sovereign, one advisor said, but you are not above the optics. That truth landed heavy. One wrong move, and the monarchy could fracture in real time. Charles considered a compromise, restoring some duties to Camilla while publicly supporting Anne's intention. But even that could appear weak. You'll look like you're caving, one aide warned, and the longer he hesitated, the more the press began shaping the story for him. King stuck in silence flashed across screens. Rumors of abdication buzzed again. Even whispers of a regency plan began resurfacing. He drafted a public address and tore it up. He rehearsed a statement and stayed quiet. My legacy can't be indecision, he told one close friend. But the truth, every option now came with a price. To act was to risk division. To delay was to invite collapse. And Charles was running out of time and support. While the king weighs choices, the wider crown feels the strain. Events canceled. Commonwealth leaders question the optics. And for the first time, even loyal royals wonder what future they're marching towards. In the next chapter, the ripple effect grows, touching William, Kate, and the very heart of succession. The broader monarchy at stake. The fallout wasn't staying contained. In Windsor, William and Kate kept public appearances, but the tension showed. Smiles seemed tighter. Kate gave no comment when asked about Anne. William nodded politely when asked about Camilla, but behind closed doors, they were watching closely. It's not our fight, William said, but even he knew that wouldn't last long. Events across the royal calendar had started shifting. Camilla quietly withdrew from 3 ceremonial duties. Anne was asked to stand in. Commonwealth leaders sent private messages requesting clarity on royal roles. We need to know who represents the crown, one Caribbean diplomat wrote. Confusion wasn't just internal, it was international. Backroom discussions at the Foreign Office revealed deeper concerns. Could Anne's move signal a shift toward her becoming a de facto co-leader in ceremonial duties? Was the Queen Consort now just a title in name? And most of all, what did this mean for succession? The palace insisted everything was stable, but no one believed that anymore. Even whispers of Operation Menai Bridge, The long-prepared succession plan for Charles began to surface not because the king was dying, but because the monarchy was wobbling. If Charles couldn't unify his own court, how could he secure the future? The question wasn't if the monarchy would continue, it was in what form and under whose hand. The pieces are now in place. Camilla has her circle. Anne commands the narrative. Charles stands paralyzed, and the public, hungry for answers. In the final chapter, everything collides: secrets, strategy, and the final question. In the game of crowns, who remains standing and who gets checkmated? The tears have fallen, the blackmail has been delivered. And now the monarchy hangs in limbo. Camilla holds secrets, Charles holds the crown, but both are clinging to something far more fragile: reputation. As aides scramble and Anne remains firm in her silent war, the king must decide. Does he give in to Camilla's threat, or risk a scandal that could bring down the whole house? The public wants answers, the press wants a headline, and the monarchy, it just wants to survive. But when personal betrayal meets political power, nothing is safe, not even the throne. Will Charles silence Camilla, or be silenced by what she knows: a one letter, one confrontation, one royal family hanging by a thread? Stay tuned, because this royal showdown is only just beginning, and what happens next could change the future of the crown forever.